So if you want to know how the professionals restore a mandolin, I can't help you, but I can show you how I fixed mine. Well, I don't know if you remember this mandolin or not, but I bought it in quartzite during the winter months, and I paid $50 for it. It says $60 right there, but I got them down 10 bucks, so really hard bargain. But it's a Conqueror mandolin, and it's not really rare, and it's probably 60s. It's not super old. And whether or not it's actually worth $50 is another thing, because if you look really closely on it, you see the top is all warped down here. It's a big gap here, it's bent and cracked. It's in nasty shape. The binding's coming off, so it's not the greatest. But I think I can have $50 worth of amusement out of it. This is what I start off with. We'll see what I end with. So my goal was to take a junk mandolin with little collectible value and make it playable. The fact that I knew nothing about mandolin restoration was not going to stop me from taking on such a project, as I merely wanted to see if I could play a mandolin without spending hundreds of dollars. If I succeeded, I could determine if I had a talent for the instrument and buy a better one later on. If I fail, and I really suck at the mandolin, nothing's lost and hopefully I'll pick up some useful skills out of it. I would definitely not do this with a family heirloom or rare instrument. The first step? Figuring out what was wrong with it. It was quite apparent that the top was severely warped, especially under the neck. The binding had come off, and the bridge was worn and propped up with a popsicle stick. The next step was to remove the strings and the tailpiece. There is even a toothpick holding up the tailpiece. I had to get the top off, so I gently scored the edge of the binding. I tried to be careful, as I really wanted to reuse the binding and not replace it. With binding removed, I could now get a blade between the body and top and break the glue bond. Now that I managed to get the top off, I've got a better idea of what I need to do. The mandolin body itself and the neck isn't too bad. You know, the bottom, has a good curve to it, a good, I guess, bowl. The neck isn't too bad. I don't know if you can see that, but it's reasonably straight. It's certainly playable. There's a little bit of separation. The glue's come off. You're right in that area here, and there's some strapping inside that's loose. So, again, not too bad. The biggest problem is the top, and it's in really bad shape. And if you can see there, but there's a big bend right across the two keyholes, sound holes I should say, and it curves down when it's supposed to be curving up. And the bottom, you can see that it's bending out here. It's not supposed to be. And the one brace, it has a big gap in behind it because it's separated. And there's actually an area right there that's got a really sharp bend to it. It's almost broken the wood in half. So there's a lot of things to do, and there's some cracks in the wood right around the sound holes. So first thing I want to do is I want to see how this reacts to steam. I've got a steamer, and I'm just going to steam this area and see how flexible I can make it. It'd be really great if it just popped back, but I don't think it's going to do that. As this was an extreme warp, I had to take extreme measures to salvage it. I used an upholstery steamer and a heat gun to saturate the wood with hot moisture. I also made wood forms to keep to the contours of the top. One by one, I clamped the forms in place to force the top back into position and let the wood dry overnight between each step. The warp was eventually reduced enough to allow reattaching the existing brace with glue and a clamp. All that steaming and clamping, it seemed to have paid off. I got rid of that dent that was here. I've got the nice curve on the top the way it's supposed to be. Support is glued back in. There's a couple of cracks that they're there. There are a couple of cracks on the top that I've glued those back and clamped them in so they're secure again. The one big problem, I don't know if you can see it or not, there is an actual crack across here, and that will get worse. So I have to put some means of support in there. I think I'm just going to put just a couple of pieces on each side of where the neck goes and glue that in place. Although I needed braces, I really didn't want to ruin the acoustics, so kept the size to a minimum and clamped in a vise overnight. I also reattached the strapping inside the body that had come loose. Now the big thing is I've got to get it back into the body, and this part of the neck, it has a slight down curve to it, so that means this has to bend up a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to steam it one last time, see if I can force it in there, add a little glue up here and in here, and put it in. I can pretty well guarantee there's going to be some adjustments needed. So that's why I'm only going to glue this part in for now, and then I'll just adjust as I go. After applying the glue, I used thin knives to guide the top into place. It was a little tricky, but it finally slid into the right spot. What I did is I started gluing the top to the side, and I just did it a bit at a time, just clamping it so that they're meeting where they're supposed to. But when I got to this part, all of a sudden the top is overhanging the side, and that's a little bit of a pain in the butt, because in order for me to correct that, I've got to pull the side out and push the top in. The only way I could see to accomplish this was to make a special tool, using a steel strip, some scrap wood, and an aluminum bar. I inserted the strip through the sound hole, attached the bar, and used a wood piece to draw the side into place. Using a lot of clamps and glue, I worked my way around the perimeter until the top was secured in place. Well, after a lot of twisting, pulling, pushing, and clamping, I finally got the top glued back down. And it's not perfect, but I think it's good enough. It's quite tight around the edge. It didn't distort too much. I'm going to have to do a little bit of cleanup just to get the binding to fit back on, but it should be okay. Although some online had recommended crazy glue, wood glue seemed to work best, and it was easy to clean up. A little painter's tape held it all in place until dry. As for that worn bridge, I had originally hoped to just buy a new one, but nobody online appeared to have what would fit. So with no other choice, I made one from a piece of ebony and a jeweler's file. Here's the before and the after. One other thing to correct was the nut. I was left-handed, so I simply removed the existing nut and reversed it. Another thing that I didn't notice at first was the neck did not line up with the tailpiece. It goes from here over to this side. So rather than try to warp the body or the neck, which I'm not going to do, I'm just simply going to move the tailpiece down a little bit so it still lines up with the neck. Well, here it is, all fixed up, no warp, no big cracks or anything like that. The only thing I've invested in this is my time and new strings. Everything else I just made work what I had in the garage, but the warp's gone. Looks good, it's holding, there's no new bending there, so I think I got it. Sounds good. Now I just gotta learn how to play it. Well, this isn't really what I sound like, but I can always dream. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please check out my other ones as well.